Hello, everyone. Luciano Oliveira, Oliveira Lawyers. Today is Sunday, and January the 28th. We're starting one more live stream. You are welcome here. If you are online, you have a priority in terms of suggesting topics to be discussed. And if we don't have any topics being suggested, we're going to be addressing some topics discussed in our latest consultations. So here is the first one, a consultation about foreign citizens buying land in Brazil. So foreign citizens are free to buy real estate in Brazil in general. However, when it comes to bare land, right, particular land, large tracts of land, there is a specific law in Brazil addressing the size of the property. So you can buy pretty much any urban property like an apartment or house in a city, but if you're buying rural property, that changes. That changes substantially because then there's going to be a limitation in size depending on the city. So it's not like across the board. There is a kind of formula applied by the Brazilian government, and it takes into consideration the location of the land as well as other factors. So even, sometimes people are going to ask us, all right, can you give us like a ballpark estimate? But there is no such a thing because land, for instance, in more remote areas of the north of the country are going to be much larger in terms of allowance for foreign citizens than this is going to be the case for states in the south. And the idea that the government is going to be protecting the ownership of rural land, reserving this possibility for Brazilians, right? And while still giving some level of access to foreign citizens. Another question we are commonly asked about that is, okay, now I understand there is such a restriction for rural land, but there is no such restriction for urban properties, right? So how do I know, for instance, if I'm going to buy, a small chácara or sítio in Brazil, like a small plot of land with a house on it, how do I know which is which? So usually the review is going to be based on the type of tax that is being charged on the property. Properties in an urban environment are going to be paying the so-called IPTU, which is the annual property tax, and properties in a rural area are going to be paying the ITR, Imposto Territorial Rural. All right, so usually this kind of review is going to be based on the type of tax being charged on the property. Okay. In terms of some other specifics when you're buying properties in Brazil, particularly if you are buying a property to qualify for the real estate investment visa, there are about 10 different requirements in total applicable to the transaction. Okay, so we are very surprised sometimes by prospective clients. They approach our firm with a property already bought. And then they are going to say, well, does this property qualify for the residency visa? And it should not be like an afterthought. A qualification for the property obviously should be done prior to buying the property, particularly if the residency is important to you. A few other examples, right? There must be a legal title. So if you're buying a property without a legal title, this property is not going to qualify at all. Unfortunately, possession-only properties in Brazil are somewhat common, but those properties, they are not going to be valid for a real estate investment visa. They are not valid at all. Another requirement is that even though the property is urban, there must be a construction on it. if you're buying from a private party, or if you're buying a pre-construction apartment, for instance, the developer is going to need to provide you with lots of documents to make up for the lack of existing construction at the time of purchase. All right, we have a Martin Seagard. If I arrive in Brazil on a tourist visa, is it possible to stay in the country while my citizenship application is being processed? I'm planning to purchase a property valued at roughly 500,000. So Martin, in Brazil, usually you are allowed to stay during the processing of your visa. Okay, you're talking about your citizenship application being processed. So it's not really clear if you have a residency already, maybe based on marriage, right? But for you to have a citizenship application being processed, before you get to that point, you must have a permanent residency, right? You don't move straight ahead with a citizenship application. First, you need a residency application. And if we are talking about real estate, of course, first you need to buy the real estate, the qualifying real estate. You need to collect all the required documents in addition to the documents for the property. And only then you're gonna be in a position to apply for the residency, not the citizenship. Citizenship is gonna be something that's gonna come down the road, okay? And if we are talking about the real estate investment route, that could take 4 years or 8 years, depending on interpretation of the law. The most conservative interpretation is 8 years, but we are aware that many applicants are getting the citizenship with just 4 years of residency in Brazil. All right, we have DB Modular. I have 2 questions. Are there strict regulations regarding purchasing shoreline property? And secondly, is there the possibility of renting with the option to buy available in Brazil? So renting with the option to buy, I know it's very common in the US. In the US, there is even, I'm not sure if there is still like the store chain in which you would buy, for instance, you would rent actually a TV, and let's say a year down the road, you could pay a kind of lump sum and actually buy the TV that you are renting. And I understand that this type of approach is also common for real estate. But in Brazil, it's extremely rare. There is nothing in law precluding you from doing so. But culturally, that's pretty rare. Okay, but particularly if you're buying like a larger amount property, and the seller has been trying to sell the property for a while, it's very well possible that the seller would be willing to get something like a rent to buy type of contract with you. Going to the other half of your question, DB, there are regulations applicable specifically to shoreline properties. In the past, they would be almost like a bar for foreign citizens to buy shoreline properties, but not nowadays, okay? Nowadays, you have the so-called terreno de marinha, particularly in the northeast of Brazil, for instance, Salvador, Fortaleza, many other capitals and cities alike. If you're buying a property like a beachfront property, this particular area is reserved by the Brazilian government for the Navy force. Okay, so the Navy force or Marinha, right, or the Navy force or the Brazilian government, they are not necessarily using that swath of land, but in theory, this land is reserved for a Brazilian government and like potentially army and navy and so on. So the arrangement here is that you can buy a property over there, but you're gonna have a co-ownership with the Brazilian government. And as a consequence, you're gonna pay some additional level of taxes because in addition to the usual taxes on the property, you're gonna be paying an additional fee because you're using land that is from the Brazilian federal government, right? There is also an additional fee when you transfer the property, when you buy the property, which is called laudemio. And this is in addition to the property transfer tax that you're going to be paying. These amounts, they are not like really high. They are, I would say, probably minor comparing to the other taxes. So they are not really a big deal when buying beachfront properties. However, in terms of the registration or issuance of the new deed, everything must be done by the books, or otherwise you're not going to be able to get a new title on your name, right? So these are more strict regulations in a sense, but they are totally doable, and they should not preclude you from buying beachfront properties. Okay, DB? All right, Catherine and Nest. Hi, Luciano. Thank you for your live streams and videos. Could you talk a little about the CDE account for non-residents? Can they work like having a regular checking account? Thank you for participating, Catherine. I'm happy to have you here, and I'm happy that you were able to get your comments in our chat section. So the CDE account is a special type of account provided by some banks in Brazil for non-residents. And this bank account, it is available not only for foreign citizens, but also Brazilian citizens who are living abroad. So when you live abroad, the idea is that Brazil is not going to bother you with taxing your global income in Brazil. And to make sure that people are, correctly informing their non-resident status, the Brazilian government is going to have in place a number of prohibitions for the so-called non-residents. And one of them, for instance, is that you're not going to be able to manage or to run a business in Brazil. And another one is that you're not going to be able to have a regular bank checking account. However, they do allow you to have this type of CDE, bank checking account, which is basically a simplified or a more limited checking account. Okay. The downside is that it's not as powerful as a more regular checking account in which you can handle investments, you can do very easily a number of transactions and applications. On the other hand, you are able to have this bank account without creating the presumption that you are a tax resident. Okay, so for people who do not live in Brazil and people who have a concern in terms of being found as a tax resident, which would trigger Brazilian taxes on their global income, the CDE bank account may be an answer. Okay. One thing that is a little bit unfortunate is the price tag. We hear information of foreign citizens paying over $200 a month to keep the CDE checking account, which is like too high in our opinion. There are others saying they can get this bank account for $60 a month. which is still pretty high, right? Like, I mean, particularly when you compare to a regular checking account, which you could get, I don't know, like for easily 10 US dollars a month, if we're talking about a regular checking account. Okay, Catherine, but certainly an option. And thank you for asking this question. Martin, just to clarify, I am a Canadian citizen. I have no status in Brazil. Right, Martin? Okay, so you are at the beginning of your journey, right? Maybe just said the citizenship application because that's your ultimate goal. But Martin, just keep in mind that this is going to be right at the end of your immigration journey. Okay, you still have different stages. Usually, we recommend people in your position to start with something such as the digital nomad visa or the retirement visa if you qualify. Those are very straightforward visas. They allow you to stay in Brazil potentially for a year, renewable for a second year. The retirement visa has no cap in terms of renewal, so you could stay for a long while. And eventually you would move, for instance, by buying a property, you could move to a permanent residency status. And only after that, you could be considering the Brazilian citizenship. I hope that makes sense, Martin. Casey on tree, welcome again, Casey. You've been here before. Welcome to our live stream. Once you receive the digital nomad visa and get into Brazil, can you leave and go back to your home country for a month or two? Casey, there is absolutely no requirement for you to stay in Brazil. You could potentially go back to your home country for a month, two, for 6 months, for as long as you want. And you can do that for as many times as you need. All right, that's the beauty of the digital nomad visa. There is no time requirement in the country, so potentially you could often and for as long as you want to your home country. Jean, hi, hi, Master. I'm from Canada. 58 years is my age. I play online and live poker pro. I am in Rio now. I have 5 CDN banks. Row, if possible, is it possible to get the digital nomad visa? And how much is it charged for that? Okay, 50 years old of age, fine, poker pro. So, regarding the age, there is no, requirements age-wise. You could be in your 20s, you could be in your 70s. Age nowadays are just a number. The Brazilian immigration doesn't have any issues with your age when you are applying for the digital nomad visa. This said, there is a need for some type of contract for the digital visa, right? So you need to meet a minimum income requirement, which would be 1,500 US dollars a month or 18,000 US dollars in a bank account, right? It gotta be one or the other in terms of the financials. And in addition to the financials, you must have a contract. There is a repetitive question we answer here at the live stream and in our consultations as well. And the question goes like this: well, if I have 20,000 in my bank account, then do I still need to provide a contract? And the answer is yes. We like to, joke that if there was no need for a contract, this should be called the 18,000 US dollar a month visa and not the digital nomad visa. Okay, so you do need some type of contract. I don't know, in your activity of playing online poker, if you do have a contract, if you have some type of paperwork supporting that you do that professionally, okay? So let's say if you have some type of sponsorship, you could ask your sponsor to provide some type of simplified contract to satisfy the immigration requirement. Exclusive 118. Hi, Luciano. If I am on a digital nomad, am I allowed to ship things like my bed, TV without being charged import tax? So if you look at the Brazilian immigration regulation, they are gonna say if you've been living abroad for over a year, by abroad I mean outside of Brazil for over a year, you have an opportunity to bring personal items with you to Brazil. You could do that like in your own flight, like if you're flying American Airlines, usually you can bring up to 5 or 6 volumes, and you're gonna pay, I think, you pay $100 for each additional, but later on they start to increase these amounts. But bottom line is you can bring up to 6 large bags, and in theory, you could bring a lot of personal stuff. If you're talking about a container, okay, a container is also feasible. In theory, you would have this opportunity to bring a container into the country free of import tax. And as everybody know, import tax in Brazil, it's pretty high. It could potentially go to up to 100% of what you're bringing into Brazil, making most of the import if you are going to pay such tax. However, if you are a digital nomad, you've been living abroad, so in theory, you would be able to bring this container. Now, just like everything else in Brazil, there is a lot of red tape and bureaucracy, and for you to import a container, you're going to need to hire. You're going to need to hire a broker in the US or in your country of origin. You're going to need to have a correspondent broker in Brazil, a customs broker, right, to handle the paperwork. There are some other additional complications which are usually standard, okay, like they happen in most occasions. Your container may stay in the port waiting to be inspected and released for up to 6 months, right? And when the container is sitting at the port, guess what? You're going to be paying a bunch of rental fees to the transportation company. You're going to be paying fees for the customs broker to go and bug the Polícia Federal, the federal police, so they are going to release your container. You're going to be paying the demurrage. Demurrage, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right, is like actually a French word, and it relates to to keeping the container in this area, right? Like, I mean, so you're paying for the container's rental, you're paying for the container's parking, you're paying for the customs broker, and we have noticed, okay, I'm not gonna say all the words, but we are usually told that there are ways, let's say non-standard ways to expedite the release of the container, but that could cost substantially more. So altogether, our recommendation to our clients is skip on the import thing, unless you have a lot of money to spend, okay, on the container thing, potentially up to $50,000 to get the single container to Brazil. So most probably than not, it doesn't make much financial sense, but you would be able to bring things that we simply do not have in Brazil. So if the point is to have things, you're not going to be able to Brazil, that may make sense, but from a financial perspective, the answer is going to usually be a resounding no, not worth. All right, case on 3 is clarifying 25,000 US Canadian dollars is going to be 18,500. So yes, roughly you should have roughly 25,000 Canadian dollars. That would be enough to get you through the digital nomad visa approval. Just remember, you still needed the contract. Okay. Um, Gian, thank you, Best Records. Thank you for participating. I hope I see you again in our live streams in the future. We have Marcela DS. Oi, Luciano, looking at your website, you assist with real estate purchases. Is this legal? Can you also help find solid, suitable properties and conduct inspections or provide the contacts? Marcela, that's a good question. We usually work with partners in like in the main markets. We do have realtors recommendations. Okay, particularly like Rio de Janeiro, Salvador, São Paulo. Just because we've been working with a large number of realtors, and over time we can tell which realtors are better prepared to assist our foreign citizen clients. Okay, Marcela. So that comes, yes, that comes along with our services, recommendations, inspections as well, right? Like we just had a transaction recently in Rio Grande do Norte. It was, if I'm not mistaken, it was a three-story house by the dunas, right? Like by the sand mountains. So there was a concern about foundation issues. So the buyer wanted to have an inspection, and we got, few options, and eventually there was an inspector that was hired to inspect the property. But yes, like we do provide all of those recommendations, during the course of our service, Marcela. All right, talking about beachfront properties, a heads up, we usually, our clients is that currently in the northeast of the country, there are developers, they are advertising villas, okay, and they are particularly targeting foreign citizens, and they are not delivering what they are promising, unfortunately, okay. So the idea is they have, I don't know, like how they do, they have a mail list, they do like it's not a live streams, they do some live streams and they do some recordings, and then they advertise in new developments like beachfront properties. They specifically call them villas, right? And then they say we don't have the villas. You're gonna buy the villa in this pre-construction stage. Later on, you're gonna get the villa, and guess what? You're gonna get a 15% return rate on your investment, right? I think whenever someone says 8% return on investment, I get concerned. I'm gonna think twice before moving ahead with something like that. But for some reason, people are gonna buy that there is a developer who's gonna deliver a 15% return on investment, right? This should be a huge red light. But I guess sometimes people, they have a good heart. They want to believe in others. And the truth is, like, we have a growing number of people contacting us about, developments in the Northeast that are not being delivered. Like they paid in full, they're not getting title, they're not getting possession, so they're not getting any return on their investment. Basically, they're just paid the price, and now they are having, some people are suing the developer as we speak. And actually, through our services, we have like a litigation partner. And those who are at this point of suing the developers, we are we're sharing our, this law firm that specializes in lawsuits, in litigation, and unfortunately, that's happening more and more. So just a heads up, right? Like if something looks and sounds too good to be true, probably it's not true. Okay, even in Brazil, like the return rates, they are superior to 10%. So if someone is promising something like 15%, 12%, or even 10%, right? Like I mean, there should be enough reason for you to think twice about proceeding with this developer. Gian, how much lawyers cost to process visa? So this is going to depend on the visa service provider. In Brazil, there is no legal requirement that the visa processing service is provided by an attorney, and therefore services that are just like, if you look at it, it's not really a law firm, it's going to be a company, a service provider, right? Um, and surprisingly, right, like you would expect this company service providers to be charging, I don't know, substantially less because they are not a law firm. But surprisingly, some of them, they are going to charge even more than what we charge. I would say the visa processing cost varies dramatically. Okay, usually if you are hiring a professional provider of service processing, region like digital nomad visa, yes, the fees are going to start somewhere at 850 US dollars, right? To share a number that everybody's going to understand. And this could go up to 2,000 US dollars, right? And for other types of visas, is gonna depend. For instance, the retirement visa is a little bit more complex than the digital nomad visa. Prices are gonna start at usually $1,250, and I know because we had a client that was coming from this other large, company. He paid $2,000 at this company to get the retirement visa approved, right? And there was a bunch of issues during the final stage of the service. So he had to hire our firm on top of whatever he paid to this other service provider. We were able to assist him. If you take a look at the comments, like in our Google reviews, you're going to see that he does explain specifically the issues that he encountered in the first provider. Okay, and we charge less. We charge less than they charge, by the way. So in terms of pricing, we are very competitive. That's probably one of the reasons why we are growing more than other firms in terms of immigration services, and our clients are more satisfied than clients from other firms. But there are many good firms in Brazil. I think it's a matter of doing your in terms of finding the ideal provider for your needs. I hope that makes sense. Right. Going back to the real estate transaction, Marcella was asking about the services surrounding buying real estate. There is a tip for people interested in buying real estate in Brazil. Usually, if you buy from a developer in big cities such as São Paulo and Rio de Janeiro, and you're buying from a established developer, that could reduce the need for legal services substantially. Okay, because then you are dealing with a seller who has been around for a while. It's not uncommon in Brazil to, for you to able to work with a developer who has been in the market for 30, 40 years, right? So if they've been in the market for 30 years, chances are they're going to continue to be in the market. Legal services is reduced substantially because then you have a trustworthy a seller. Okay. On the other side, if you are dealing with a private party, uh, it works kind of opposite because a private party usually, like if they go under, maybe they don't have, like assets for you to go after. And unfortunately, in Brazil, there is no title insurance and there is no escrow account. So therefore, if you're dealing with a private seller, meaning like a family who could be selling a property, it could be like an individual, single person who's selling a property. In those cases, retaining a law firm is highly advisable because you don't know if you're gonna get what you pay for, right? And it is surprising that so many times people are more concerned with the return, or I don't want to pay you percentage of the property I'm buying. Like I don't want to pay that to a lawyer. I'm more concerned about the currency exchange rate. If I'm gonna get 10 cents more in this other venue than I'm gonna get with you. And then later on, like that has happened, unfortunately, more than once. People are gonna come back and they are gonna say they got into a botched real estate transaction, and now they gonna need to do something, and this something is probably gonna be litigation, and I are in this position because litigation in Brazil could easily last more than 10 years, right? And nobody's going to be working on a contingency basis only for you, right? You're going to be paying some good money for problem that you're never gonna be sure that you're gonna be able to recover the money that you lost in the first place. So therefore, again, no title insurance, meaning if you buy a property from the wrong seller, or if the seller has issues that are going to expose your property later on to litigation, nobody's going to come to your rescue. You're going to be on your own. And the absence of escrow in Brazil means you need to pay first and hope the seller is going to perform, that the seller is going to convey title to you, and there is no escrow, right? So therefore, extremely important that when you're buying a property from a private seller, that you do have a proper legal representation. Martin Sigurd, in preparation for moving to Brazil, I would like to send the proceeds from the sale of my home in Canada to a bank account in Brazil. It will be roughly 500,000 US Canadian dollars, right? Roughly the process. So, Martin, you have a couple of options, right? Like one option is to open a resident bank account in Brazil, and for this process, you will need the CPF tax ID, okay? And the other alternative, one that I think it would be probably better because you don't want to move your money before you get the immigration status. I would tell you, like we're starting with the digital nomad visa. First, you file for the digital nomad visa. Once the process is completed with the approval and your registration in Brazil as a foreign citizen, you're gonna get the so-called RNM card. The RNM card is an identification card. We like to joke it's the Brazilian green card. Once you have this card, you're gonna be able to open a regular bank account in Brazil, which is gonna be a much better bank account. And at that point in time, then you would send the money proceeds from the sale of your home in Canada to your bank account in Brazil. I think it would make more sense for you to follow those steps, Martin. Catherine, if a person is in a stable, if they break up, make up, and she buys a property and it's only in her name, can the partner claim part of the property even though they don't live together, right? So, Catherine, the point here, there are several factors involved. I'm going to talk about a couple of them. União estável, right? Like união estável, for those who do not know, it means common law marriage. And this thing is really big in Brazil as we speak. Like the judiciary, they love like new theses or new legal concepts. And although the common law marriage, known as união estável in Brazil, is not something new, nowadays it has reached a status that, in my opinion, sometimes it's even more impactful than a regular marriage, right? That's the case only in Brazil. In no other country in the world, you're gonna see something like this. So let me repeat: união estável, which is like the common law marriage in Brazil, in some instances is gonna be more, is gonna represent more commitment for the parties involved than a regular marriage, right? I'm not going to be entering into details, but particularly during succession and state planning. If you are married, you're going to have better tools to dictate how the assets are going to be distributed than through união estável, right? So, in other words, sometimes people are gonna get into a união estável because they don't wanna, face a marriage, and guess what? Now they have something that's more sticky than a marriage, okay? But that's only in Brazil, typical of Brazil. Now let's go back to the core of Katerina's question, right? So a união estável does not require, obviously, any type of paperwork, right? Like if two people, if they are in a relationship and from a third party perspective, this relationship, it's something meaningful, right? That could be the basis for a união estável claim, okay? Until a couple of years ago, there would be like some expectation in terms of duration. So if you're just like for 8 months with a person, a judge will say, well, it should be at least a year, right? Probably until 5 years ago, there was an expectation that people would be living together. So, well, are you guys living together? No, you're not living together. Well, so that's not really a união estável. But again, in my opinion, unfortunately, nowadays, judges are much faster in terms of finding people in a união estável, even when this couple is not living together or they haven't been together for a long time. Okay, now. Those decisions, they will be based on the specific facts. So even though I can share those examples with you, like we can never tell upfront what's going to be the outcome, right? Like until we know all the specifics, okay? Usually from a more practical perspective, when a person is buying a property, this person is going to declare in the closing papers if she is in a união estável or not. Okay, and that could create a presumption, at least from the property's perspective, that the person is not in a união estável. All right. But can the partner claim part of the property even though they don't live together? Yes, the partner could claim part of the property, particularly if it is a bad faith partner, right? Let's say this other person obtained all the money or got the money as a gift from a friend, and then this bad faith partner is going to show up and say, well, but that was, I don't know, taking care of our other affairs, and that's only right that this property is going to be our common property. Like it sounds like a long shot for this, partner to claim ownership in the property. But in terms of claiming something, people can pretty much do whatever they want. If they are going to prevail in court, that's going to be something different. Okay, Catherine, I hope this helps with your analysis. Marcela Dias, muito bom, obrigada. Obrigado a você, Marcela, por participar. I will reach out for a consultation in the future if I decide to move forward with a golden Brazil. Rio de Janeiro would be my target market. Yes, in Rio de Janeiro, that's probably where we have most of our transactions, not surprisingly, okay? And before people say, all right, like I see you are based in Rio de Janeiro, I'm going to tell you we started actually in Sao Paulo, and then we basically started or got our office in Rio de Janeiro because of the number of transactions. And of course, nowadays, because we have an office, we have like a history of satisfied clients, these, as a result, is increasing even more like the number of transactions we have in Rio de Janeiro. But I would say that the reason for that is because Rio de Janeiro is probably unbeatable, right? Like, I mean, of course, there are so many other interesting cities in Brazil, but Rio de Janeiro is in its own class. It's one of what we think to be the capitals of the world, right? Like when you think about New York, you think about Paris, you think about Tokyo. I think Rio de Janeiro is probably the only Brazilian city that would be on the same level as New York, Paris, and Tokyo. That's my opinion. And I'm from São Paulo, by the way. I'm not from Rio, okay? But I do love Rio de Janeiro. Okay, I do love it a lot, and I think it's a great choice for you, Marcela. All right, Catherine, thank you, Catherine. Again, happy to see you finally being able to chat with us here during our live stream, and happy to address other topics of your interest. All right, I see here, as usual, we have people from the US, Canada. Just remember that, and not everyone knows about that, but there was an expectation that on January the 10th, which was on Wednesday, there is going to be revival of the tourist visa for US citizens, Canadian citizens, uh, and Australians. Okay, but that didn't happen. That didn't happen. The Brazilian government postponed again. Okay, so now the new date, I think it's April the 10th or April the 11th. I'm not sure. It's one of those two dates. And that means that in the meantime, the waiver remains in place. US citizens, Canadian citizens, and Australian citizens can basically just go to the airport, buy a ticket, and fly to Brazil without a concern. There is now, the Brazilian Congress is fighting with President Lula uh, to avoid President Lula from enforcing the revival of the visa requirement. The Brazilian Congress is pretty happy with the results of the visa waiver. Of course, if there is no visa requirement, people are gonna be deciding in favor of such country for their trips. And the Brazilian Congress wants Brazil to continue enjoying, this favoritism from, the U.S., Canada, and Australia. And President Lula, under the reciprocity argument, is saying, you know what? If these countries they are asking Brazilians to get a visa first, I want them to get a visa before. The concept of the concept of you know of this concept from President Lula, I mean, is more ideological than practical, right? Because the idea is to have a parallel between how each country promotes like immigration, but we cannot, we cannot forget that we don't have like thousands and thousands of U.S. citizens like invading Brazil to live in Brazil illegally. And unfortunately, we cannot deny that this is the case for Brazilians actually, crossing the borders, the south borders to Mexico to live illegally in the U.S. Okay, so that's these are two perspectives, right? Like I mean, and I understand President Lula. President Lula has always this desire, like to make Brazil and the Brazilian people to look the best possible, from an international perspective, and this is, like of course, like a good thing. On the other hand, you have more practical aspects of immigration. And indeed, when you ask for a visa, a number of people, they're going to say, well, I don't need a visa to go to Mexico, right? So let's skip on Brazil, let's go to Mexico. So these are the factors in play. But as you speak, there is a waiver in place. So if you are from one of those three countries, you can come to Brazil as you wish. There's going to be the 90-day, period of time in which you can stay in Brazil without any headaches. In the past, people would be able to renew the 90 days with an additional 90 days without any reason whatsoever. You could basically go to the Polícia Federal in Brazil and say, I wanted to extend my stay, and the reason for that is that I am in love with Brazil, and that would be enough reason, right? Not nowadays. We've been getting a lot of feedback from clients who try to get the extension, and they are going to be asked, well, what is the reason? And the reason got to be something extraordinary, like, I don't know, you caught COVID, God forbid, right? But that's going to be an example of the type of reason you should be providing to get an extension of an additional 90 days. And after this extension, if you are able to provide an extraordinary reason, you're not going to be able to get another extension, right? So altogether, under extraordinary circumstances, you're going to get 6 months. If you want to stay for longer, then yes, you're going to need to secure something like the digital nomad, something like the retirement visa, or even better, the residency through investment in real estate, right? Okay, that's in our opinion, the best route for those who want to stay in Brazil for longer term. On the Brazil retirement visa is that it's usually good for up to 2 years renewable, but for some reason the Brazilian immigration is issuing those visas mostly on a yearly basis, meaning you kind of get stuck in this loop of renewing this visa every single year. And given the paperwork, the process, potentially you would need to hire an immigration service every single year, right? So, of course, we as providers, like we're not gonna, we're not decline the service. We're gonna help you every single year that you need. But I think it represents like an unwelcome burden on the foreign citizen, and that's why we tell our clients whenever you have the access to the possibility or to the funds to buy a real estate property in Brazil, that's an amazing route because potentially you get 4 years right off the bat. These 4 years, once it's over, you can get the permanent residency for to stay in Brazil or live in Brazil for as long as you want. And in addition to that, it does open the door for you to apply for the citizenship in Brazil in as little as 4 years after securing the permanent residency. So, all in all, a pretty amazing route, the real estate investment in Brazil. Marcela Diaz, I cannot imagine all the possible pitfalls regarding legal matters, and I would never make such a commitment working alone with private sellers. The expression bicho de sete cabeças comes to mind. Very interesting, Marcela. Yes, bicho de sete cabeças is a Brazilian expression when we see something that's complex that we shouldn't be handling by ourselves. We're going to say it's a bicho de sete cabeças, which roughly translates as a seven-head monster, right? Seven-head monster. That's the bicho de sete cabeças, and we use the expression, to convey exactly this type of thing. Uh, Real estate transactions in Brazil, they are substantially more complex than uh, they are in abroad. But when there is a foreign citizen in the loop, like there is an increased complexity, because foreign citizens, they are going to trigger the need for some requirements that do not apply to Brazilian buyers. So let me say that again. Even when all parties are Brazilians, the transaction is already complex enough. However, if you add to the mix a Brazilian party, in this case, the transaction is going to become even more complex because you're going to have requirements that do not exist when there are Brazilians only. And I can give you a couple of examples right off the bat. One of them is that you're going to need to present documents with an apostille. An apostille is a type of certification provided by the government in charge of the document that was issued. So, for instance, if you were born in New York, you're going to need to present a a birth certificate with the apostille from New York. And in addition to one translation for your documents, you're going to need to record these documents in a specific cartório in São Paulo just to have those documents valid. Okay? Another major source of complexity is when you send the money to Brazil, the money does not show up automatically at the seller's bank account. There is a whole need for a compliance process. There is like a number of historical reasons for Brazil to handle money in this way, but the bottom line is that like the currency exchange alone, it could be a project by itself, right? We have some clients here, I believe in this live, who are using our service as we speak, just because of such complexity. And like whenever you are handling a complex process and you're dealing with something that's important to you, like your money, particularly if it is like a sizable amount of money, there shouldn't be any room for risks, right? Like, because again, you want to get what you're paying for, right? Sonier, thumbs up. Thank you so much, Camila, for being here in our live stream. I hope to see you again in the future. Regen, if I go to school for Portuguese, can I get a visa easily? So, Regen, studying Portuguese, it's potentially gonna allow you to get the student visa. Okay, now applying for the visa easily, it's gonna depend on who's gonna be providing the Portuguese program, right? Like if you go to any, more simplistic schools, they're probably not going to assist you with the visa. If you go, for instance, with a kind of college or a higher end Portuguese school, potentially they are going to help you apply for the visa, but not surprisingly, the cost of assisting you with the visa application is probably going to be built into the cost of the Portuguese program, right? I mean, there is no free lunch regime. So uh, the short answer is yes. That's a potential route for you to pursue, and the detail is that they will most probably build into the program price the cost for them to assist you with the visa, right? It's going to be either this or they are going to say, you know what, we potentially qualify for you to get a visa, but you got to hire someone else. It's going to be one of those two. Well, we've been together here for an hour. I appreciate your participation. As usual, we're reaching an end here in our live stream. We're going to have another live stream on Wednesday. So if you are going through what we spoke today after the live and you realize you have new questions or, some aspect that you would want to have clarified, you are welcome to come back here and meet with us on the last live stream of January, which is going to be on January the 31st. Okay? So I hope you guys have a great rest of your Sunday and see you again on Wednesday.